Okay, then, good evening, everyone. The clock has struck 6. In fact, it's just after, so if we can make a start. Welcome, first off, to the meeting of the Adult Social Care Select Committee. Thank you for attending. Lisa, if we get to the agenda, have we got any apologies? So no apologies, that's okay. No substitute members? Okay. Yes, about the, yes. Been asked to remind you, apparently, this is all going on YouTube now, the actual. So I hope you combed your hair and, yeah, sort of, no, all right. So you put your best side forward. So, yeah, so if you can just make sure when you, I think everyone did last time, but just to be on the side, just make sure you do put your mic on. Otherwise, all the legions of people watching will not be able to hear us. Okay, so so please do that. Okay, are there any additional declarations of interest?
Yes, I'm a support provider.
Okay.
For 18 and over.
Thanks.
Okay,
thanks, Carol. Is that sufficient information? Yeah.
Is that for any specific item? Sorry. Is that for any specific item on the agenda or? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, across the board. Thanks, Caroline. Okay. Have you all had a chance to read the minutes from last meeting? Are you all happy for me to sign them as a correct record? Anything from anyone? Is everybody okay? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, right. So, public forum, no members of the public present. So, we would be moving on to item agenda number 6, which is the Woodside Day Service, but Matt has requested that we just move number 9 up the agenda, if that's okay with everyone. Just, is it Tracy? So Tracy hasn't got to listen to us for the entire night. She can make a report and then make haste. So, Matt, over to you. Tracy, take it away.
Thank you. Just before we open that report, Chair, I just wanted to explain to the committee.
Of course, sorry. Yeah.
No problem at all. Why the planned item on continuing healthcare was pulled from your papers, and apologies to those of you who might have had 2 sets of papers. It is good governance to make sure it's all accurate. The late nature of the change of plans entirely my responsibility. The Integrated Care Board have asked that we bring the item to next meeting on the basis that we're going through a series of cases that are currently in dispute with them, and the learning from that process will need to feature in the report, irrespective of whether the outcome is positive or negative from the council's perspective. So you will have the original report plus an update from the work that's currently going on at the next meeting, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, that's put everyone in the picture about that, so we'll have a clearer idea at the next meeting. Thanks, Matt. So, yeah.
Okay. So our first item for tonight, you remember last time we went through the supporting evidence that we need to table, not just to this committee to account for quality in terms of the work of the Directorate, but also in terms of the supporting evidence that the Care Quality Commission will look for. The annual complaints, comments and compliments report. The last one is quite often forgotten, and the first 2 very rarely are, is a statutory report. Tracy's been to this committee for a number of years. Tracy's our complaints manager, both for adults and for children's. Obviously, it's an adults report this evening. So Tracy's going to summarise the headlines from the report for you, and then there'll be the usual Q&A session, Chair. So over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Matt said, this is a statutory requirement. So the reason for bringing the report really is for approval, so that this report can be publicised after any comments, obviously, from yourselves. The report gives you an overview of what complaints we've had for last year, 2023 to 31st of March 24. I'm unaware of obviously what your knowledge is of the types of complaints we've got. So Matt asked me to give sort of a bit of a breakdown of what the types of complaints that we get before I go through the overview of the complaints. So of the complaints report. So some of the complaints we can get are regarding deprivation. This is when someone's carrying out a financial assessment and circumstances may identify that they suggest someone has deliberately deprived themselves of assets in order to reduce the level of contribution. So we do get complaints in relation to deprivation. Top-ups are mentioned within the report. This is when the council have funded residential placement and the local authority pay a standard contracted rate for residential care, and additional contribution is made by the service user. And then if the home of choice isn't the one that that person wants to go to, or it's not suitable, any difference in the funding would be asked and required of, obviously, of the family or friends. We do get complaints from external providers, from people who are obviously receiving care, and we get complaints in relation to those providers, and a number about financial charging and delays in assessment. So it's just really as an overview. So for this report, we had 138 complaints, which are broken down between statutory and corporate complaints. Anything that doesn't fall within the statutory regs then falls under a corporate complaint. So we had 42 statutory complaints compared to 15. We've done a lot of work analysing the complaints to ensure that they're going into the correct procedure. So that's really looking at that. We've undertaken quite a significant amount of training with the local government ombudsman to ensure, obviously, that the complaints are being registered correctly and processed through the complaints system. 15 compared, obviously, were from last year. 96 corporate complaints compared to 170, and that really is the difference, because we've looked and reviewed them all. In the previous year, a total of 185 complaints were received, so there is a decrease in the number of complaints. There's no real reason for that we can see. There's no no significant reason that we can say to you. It's just there is just a decrease. But what we have noticed is the complexity of the complaints are greater now than they've ever been, covering a number of services and a number of external services, including ourselves, obviously making a coordinated response. Timescales for resolving complaints during 23-24 show that 74% of all complaints seen a response within 20 working days, compared to 63 in the previous year, which is obviously an increase in performance. 35 statutory complaints have been responded to within 20 working days, and this equates to 92% in the previous year. 13 cases, 87%. Therefore, there has been an improvement in performance in this area during 23-24. Of the 42 complaints, 3 of those were withdrawn and 1 was referred to another department. So statutory complaints received 7 were upheld, 18%, and 12 partially upheld, 32%. And this compares to 15 statutory complaints received for the period of April 2022 to March 23, of which 1 was upheld, 6%, and 5 partially upheld. So the overall number of statutory complaints has increased, with the number of complaints being upheld and partially upheld increasing as well. Out of the 96 corporate complaints received, 20 were upheld, 21%, and 16 partially upheld. And this compares to a total of 170 in 22-23. 39 were upheld, 23%, and 28 partially upheld, 16%. There's been a decrease in the number of complaints received and a slight variation in the number of complaints upheld and partially upheld in percentage terms between 22-23. 74 corporate complaints have been responded to within 20 working days, which equates to 80% for the previous year, 22-23. It was 71% based on 121. So therefore, there has been an increase in performance in this area during 23-24. 35 informal comments were received. These are usually don't fall within the complaints category, but all of these informal comments will get a response. If the complaints have completed the complaints process, the complainant has a right to go to the local government ombudsman. So we had 2 cases which received covering the following areas, compared to 7 the previous year. So the one was assessment and independence. That's Lit North, and that complaint was about a decision to move the complainant's mother to a different care home unless they can pay the top-up fee. And they found the council was at fault, and it was upheld. And that was obviously completed in June this year. And there was one for Dudley Disability Services, preparing for adult, and that one was upheld as well regarding the care and support. And that was completed in January. And not to be forgotten, 296 compliments were received, which is an increase from the 247 from the previous year. And that's really a brief overview of the report. And if anyone's got any questions.
Can I just add before? No, that's fine. Thanks, Tracy. So just before we open it up to Q&A, we don't wait until the end of the year to look at complaints and the learning from complaints. So Tracy comes along to the management team in adult social care on roughly a quarterly basis. We don't look at the individual cases there, but we look at the themes that are emerging to see if there's anything that's happening at scale that needs to be addressed faster. And many of the themes in this report are reflected in the improvement priorities as well. So what we're trying to do is have a cycle whereby we're dealing with things as quickly as we can do. We're reflecting the things that haven't gone right in things like staff training, communication, etc. And really, in terms of the Ombudsman, by the time a case goes to the Ombudsman, we're effectively saying we've exhausted the council's process. So of all the things in this report, I'm particularly encouraged that the overall number of cases that have gone on and been upheld have decreased over the course of the last 12 months, because that shows that the focus is right and the process that we've got for trying to deal with things locally in the first instance has been more effective. Though some very interesting trends, as you've seen in the report, about the numbers going up and down based on whether it's the statutory process, the social care process, etc. So we'll open it out for Q&A. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Tracy. Questions? Councillor Aston?
Thanks, Chair. I'm sure we can all agree that a healthy organisation demonstrating good governance is one that learns from its complaints. So it's very reassuring to hear about the way complaints are dealt with, are regularly reviewed. Just a couple of points from me. I mean, I think it's important to reiterate the fact that there are double the number of compliments than there are complaints in the 2023-24 period. And I think perhaps we should make celebrate that a bit more than one sentence, because that's obviously something to be proud of. Just a couple of points of clarification. I noticed from page 66, there are a number of care companies, including the breakdown of service area corporate complaints. Are we saying that a complaint against a private care provider is counted as a corporate complaint because it comes via the council? Is that right?
No.
Right.
Okay. It will be the nature of the complaint. So regardless of where it comes from, it depends on where it falls. And a lot of the complaints regarding external providers may be times of calls. It could be that there are safeguardings within that. So that would then go a completely different route. It would fall down a safeguarding route. So it depends on the nature of the complaint. So it doesn't matter whether it comes from an external provider, a relative. It will be when it comes in, and we'll look at the statutory regs then and see whether that applies to that. So it just depends what the complaint is.
Okay. Brilliant.
Just on that, Councillor Aston, if I can just nip in. So the statutory complaints then, can you just imagine we know nothing, which is probably true. Give me an example of a statutory complaint, just so as we're really clear on that.
So a statutory complaint would be like a delay in an assessment. That would be a statutory reg, because it would be based against the Care Act. So the ones that, like Matt was saying about CQC, that's the ones where we're trying to home in on those, because that is a deprivation of someone's liberty in the fact that they haven't had an assessment when they should have done. But a corporate complaint could be, well, I didn't like the way that I was spoken to on the phone by that particular person. That's not making any impact on someone's care. It's just really how that person believes they were allegedly spoken to or dealt with by a particular person.
So from statutory, there are legal obligations. Corporate is just, like you say, something that they're not happy about, which, okay. So in terms of the, sorry, Adam, welcome back to you. In terms of the corporate comparison chart then, the relevance of the breakdown underneath in terms on, I know what Councillor Aston was getting at in terms of other companies. Just how does that help us? What are we, because you've got the corporate comparison chart there, which suggests that they've gone down, that went up and they've gone down again. So can we be sure these are complaints against Dudley Council then? I think that's...
Oh, yes,
they are complaints against us.
Against, it's, I say against us, it is a complaint that we receive in. So for an example, if it was an external provider complaint, we could get a complaint in from a care company, and the particular person might be a relative, or it might be the person receiving the care, and they can be complaining about the attitude of that carer, or they were supposed to come at 8 o'clock and they've come at 9 o'clock. They didn't last for 15 minutes. The care, it was only 10 minutes. So because we externally commission that service.
So we've got responsibility to hear that complaint.
Ultimately, that responsibility comes back to the local authority because we've commissioned the service, and how the local government ombudsman will look at it. You have commissioned that service. It's your service user. So ultimately, the responsibility falls back within ourselves.
Yeah.
But we would then forward that complaint to the external provider to investigate and provide their findings, which we would then obviously look at and then provide that to the service user. But if they're dissatisfied, ultimately it is our responsibility to monitor and take that complaint forward.
That makes perfect sense. Thanks for that, Claire. Sorry, Adam, back to you, mate.
Oh, no, it just seems a bit harsh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it's added to our figures. We've received this many complaints, but actually, the complaint may be regarding something arguably outside our control, and which something that a private company. But I get your point that we commission that service and we're ultimately responsible.
But if you take that particular example, say it's somebody who's getting domiciliary care, the support plan will detail when that service should be provided to meet that person's need. If that isn't happening, irrespective of whether the individual's raised it, the care company first or come straight to us, it's our legal responsibility to make sure that that person's needs are being met. So that missed visit could be for something as vital as medication or to help somebody out of bed. So ultimately, rightly, I think, the council will be looked at whether we directly provide the service to the individual or we commission it. We've still got the responsibility to make sure those needs are being discharged. So that's why, and quite often a lot of the legwork where the complaints do come in about the providers, Tracy will quite rightly signpost it back. We'll want the evidence to be assured that the issue's been addressed with. We'll liaise with the family to make sure that they're satisfied as well. And it's also important that that data is then fed back into our commissioning team. So they don't just have the statistical data that we collate and the contractual data that we collate. This is another route of feedback to inform us about what's working and what's not working. And I won't get into individual care providers here because there's commercial sensitivity. But there's examples in the past where we were getting a volley of complaints, and I'm going back several years now, about a care provider. That, coupled with the data we had from social workers, brought forward the end of that contract because the scale of those issues was so significant and the consequences were of concern, and we weren't satisfied that that particular provider had the means to turn it around and deliver the service they were being paid for. So that's why I think it's important that there is transparency through a single point in this case. That
just on that, what do we tell service users? What first port of call should they use? Do we encourage them to contact the care provider in the first instance or us? Because if we're encouraging them to come to us and all the local authorities are encouraging them to go directly to the care company, do you then get a disparity between the number of complaints received? If you know what I mean?
I think it is fair to say that the administration of the complaints process isn't identical in each council. My view, and Tracy's view is probably more important here, is that you would, of course, try in the first instance to get that issue resolved between the care provider and the individual. It's quicker, there's an established relationship, they know the person, and they really, if they're a good provider, and the majority of our providers are rated as good, they will want to understand what the issue is and get it sorted out. So that's the normal first call. Obviously, if somebody has raised concerns and don't feel they're being listened to, don't feel the situation's improving, don't feel that things are changing, and they have a right to come through us in any case. So it's a bit like safeguarding, really. You don't want to dissuade people from raising the issues that they're worried about. You want to try and achieve resolution and move things forward. Tracy, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with Matt, but that would be the first instance, because if someone raises a complaint, whether they phone us up, the first thing is, have you raised it with the care company first? And they will say, well, yes, we have, but we're not happy that we feel as though they've investigated that. So we do always ask first to see whether they've raised it with them, because it gives the care company the right to come back and obviously and not break that relationship down. So it's usually when they come to us, and when they do come in, if we can see straight away where, like Matt says, there's mismedication, if someone's been left in bed and not taken, these are safeguarding issues if it's time medication. So that would then come out of our process and we'd refer that to safeguarding. So we sort of filter it down at that point as well. But if it's just, I should have a 10 o'clock call and they're not coming till 12 o'clock, we would go back to the care provider and, you know, and try and negotiate. So we do try not to put them through our process straight away, because obviously it does break the relationship down with the care provider and the person who's receiving the care.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Tracy. Any more questions, comments? Yeah, it's Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In the report, Tracy, you said how there's now more complex cases than ever. I think we can all have our own experience of that. How concerned are you about that? Because obviously it takes up more officer time, takes up more resource. And I was just kind of furthering that point. Do we feel that there needs to be a mechanism in to monitor that and make sure that's included in reports, because it takes up so much resource, so much time?
I know this is an adults committee, but we found this within children as well, because I deal with the report and I deal with all the children's complaints. And I do think the complexity has got greater for both services. But I do think it is expectations as well, because the complainant, they don't know that all of the things they're raising falls probably within 7 services. And it's coordinating that and trying to manage that within the timescales and manage the expectations. You could also have some of that within the hospital. It could be an external provider that some of that is. So it's coordinating that and managing the expectations. But I do think they are more complex. But if we can see that complaint's complex, straight away we'll go back to the complainant and say, well, we have said 20 working days, but you have raised a significant amount of issues that cover a lot of services. So we need to make you aware that there could be a delay. I think as managing it, that's about keeping the complainant informed. An added factor that we do have is the NHS have a different time scale to us. So it's managing that process as well. So if we can see we've got all of our side together, sometimes very, very rare, but we will send our response out and say that we forwarded the hospital part with their permission, and then the hospital would do a separate response. But we do try to do one overall response, because the complainant at the end of the day isn't interested, and it's not their concern that it covers so many different areas. But we have noticed that there is a lot more complexity. But I think that's just the nature of the service now, really.
And do you feel like that we can monitor that properly, make sure it's in reports properly, so as that can be given due regard in allocation of resources and understanding of context around the figures?
I think with a lot of, where is it the senior executive board, Matt, where the corporate complaints with the timescales?
Yes, it's called CMT now.
Yeah, is
corporate management team.
Sorry. Yeah, but that team, obviously that's all monitoring all the timescales, because they want to know anything that's gone over timescales, so we can feedback that this is a complex case. Obviously anything that's really complex, it's noted by the heads of service. But I think it's really hard to manage the timescales within 20 working days for that. But I think as long as everyone's aware, that timescale from corporate complaints stands. But with statutory complaints, believe it or not, there isn't a timescale. It's just that we tie it to 20 working days so that that the complainant isn't waiting a significant time for a response.
Okay, and just to add a bit of info on for me really, you said the NHS timescales are different. What are the NHS timescales?
I think they're about, there might be 35 days they are. So it's quite a big difference to our 20. So if you're waiting for the majority of it, it's only a small amount from the NHS. It makes more logical sense to send our side out and then ask the NHS to do their. But we have it the other way around where the NHS will have a lot of it and there's just a small amount of ours. So we'll just send our response over and ask them if we want us to do it directly to the complainant or incorporate in there. So we do try to manage the timescales as best as we can.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Just on you mentioned the Ombudsman as sort of the last port of call for the complainant. Now, forgive me if I've missed it in here somewhere, but what are we talking about in terms of numbers? Do a lot go to the Ombudsman? And if so, how many are? Because my own experience of Ombudsman from sort of a previous life is that they rarely sort of uphold complaints, generally speaking. I'm just wondering how often we fall foul of the Ombudsman if that information is available.
Can I answer that one?
Yeah, go for it.
The Ombudsman have changed their approach to how they handle complaints. They've had a new director. So how they're looking at it, because of the number of complaints they were receiving, they look at them on a, I want to say a proportional way to see if I look at that complaint and am I going to investigate it, have I got a very good chance this is going to be upheld? So we don't know when the cases go to the local government ombudsman, whether they're going to investigate them or not. So the complainant can go with all of their evidence. They will come to us and approach us and ask for all the relevant evidence in that case. And then they make that decision and they advise us.
Whether they even investigate it or not.
Whether they wish to investigate it and it will go for investigation, or they're choosing not to investigate it at that point. So it's in their hands, really. So when it goes through all of the complaints process, we'll send all of the things to the local government ombudsman, all of the documentation they've requested. They'll review it and then they'll come back to us and say, we're going to investigate this now, and we're going to appoint an investigator and we'll notify you what information we need. And we have to wait then on them to come back, and then the process starts.
And in terms of sort of numbers, how often does the Ombudsman deem it worthy of a case worthy of investigation?
Well, I think in this we've only had two, haven't we?
The data's on the top of page 63,
Yeah,
Chair, so it's the two cases referred to there for the last 12 months.
But I think previous 22, 23, did we have 7? Sorry, I've got, yeah, 7.
64. So 2 cases looked at, 7.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, then thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is the committee happy to accept the report? And okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt, for that. Is there anything else we need to get approved? Oh yes, there is one other thing just on that. Are we happy for it to go to publication? It's my understanding that it has been approved by senior managers already. So yeah, so now this is our approval that this can go to publication. Lovely. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Right, okay. Woodside, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yeah, over to you.
Just before I hand over to Darryl Filipowski, the Head of Adult Mental Health, this was an item that's carried forward from last year's scrutiny programme. There are some members here who were on the committee last year, so you'll recall that we moved out of the old building, the Victorian School. The model of the service changed, some of which Darryl will cover in his report. And what you asked for as a committee were what were the outcomes of that new service, what differences had happened, and what assurance could you receive about the new model of of service that was going in. So I'll hand over to Daryl to take you through the report, and then we'll pick up questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So just gives a background. The 12-week programme that we're talking about ran from April to June 2024. This was an outcome-focused and recovery-focused programme. Like I say, it was time-limited. We used the community engagement staff and we built a new programme from scratch, which specifically focused on outcomes, building social networks, understanding healthy lifestyle choices, and exploring creativity with the people who used our services. We had 52 citizens come through this cohort from April to June, but for the final session, only 16 were still in attendance, and they cited various reasons, other commitments. They lost interest in the programme, they didn't find it engaging enough. So we evaluated the views of the service users who attended and some of the feedback. So we've had comments such as people found it very helpful for mixing with other people who are like-minded. It gave him a sense of routine and confidence to interact with others. Another comment was somebody found it helpful. Another comment was very enjoyable and they learned a lot. Another comment from somebody, staff were amazing and they provided a fun, safe environment to run the service. And the overall rating that the citizens gave the programme was a 4.2 out of 5. So it was a fairly high rating for the programme. We also evaluated the exit strategy of the programme. So obviously, like I say, it's 12 weeks with that outcome focused. So what was the outcome? So we wanted to evaluate that. Were we successful in signposting people to other community services? And we've got some examples of that in the report. So for example, Citizen 1 is now attending the gym at Russell's Hall Hospital, an arts and crafts group every Tuesday at Woodside Methodist Church. Citizen 2 has been referred to Aspire for You and is satisfied with the service they're receiving there. Citizen 5 is now a disability ambassador for Wolves Football Club and is volunteering at Woodside with the drop-in session that we run on a Friday. Citizen 8 has been discharged from secondary mental health service and is now signposted back to their GP. And Citizen 15 feels confident to access the community independently and has obtained a volunteer position. So we evaluated the outcome. Also, all citizens who have gone through the programme received contact details for Adult Social Care Access Team and information on community resources. And they scored it slightly higher, 4.3 out of 5 for the exit strategy of the programme. So another part of the report is recommendations of what we do next, because the initial cohort, like I say, 52 people, the numbers are not there to sort of sustain the programme. So we've expanded the criteria, we've opened it up to all of adult social care, we've tried to promote it more, and the numbers coming through are just not there to sustain the programme. So what we've done is we actually have commissioned a preventative offer from Aspire for You. So the council already has a preventative offer from Aspire for You for mental health. So we propose, and what we have done is shift our preventative offer to Aspire for You. We already commissioned this service. We already pay for the service. It provides a 10-week programme. It's a very, very similar programme to the Woodside programme. It has a wide variety of activities, and the key is that they have facilities all across the borough. So it's not limited to one location in Dudley. It's all across the borough. They have good engagement. We've been signposting people to that service, and like some of the feedback that I've referred to earlier, people are liking that service. So we still run a drop-in service on a Friday at Woodside Community Centre. So the proposal is that we've still got the programme, we can scale it back up at any time. But as we already commissioned a service, it would almost be a double provision of service to continue providing the service at Woodside. And with the decrease in demand, it doesn't make sense to keep it running at this time. So the proposal is to scale back the programme to the drop-in 1 day a week on a Friday, to maximise our commission services through Aspire for You, because we're not utilising all the hours that we're contracted to commission. And by doing so, we'd be saving around 14.6k just by scaling back the service.
You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to do something.
I misread the end of the music there. Apologies, Chair. So, open to
Okay,
questions.
thanks. Is it Darryl? Darryl? Yes, thanks, Darryl. Questions, comments? Caroline?
Right, I'm glad that information has come through about Woodside only reducing to 1 day a week. Where is Aspire for You situated in Dudley?
So it's in different various community venues. So it's like in churches and it's in like community halls. So it's all over.
I have a lot of people coming in that they found that Woodside was far for them to go.
Yeah.
And also some of them wanted the programme to last longer, but after the 12 weeks, it's a lot with learning disability and mental health. I find that we're struggling to get there to Woodside, but to know that it's back in Dudley, can we be given information on all the hubs and
Yes,
the local areas where these Aspire for You are, so I can refer?
Yeah.
And can it be a direct referral from us, or has it got to go through the council? Or
so it would come through the mental health community engagement service. So we sort of gatekeep, as it were, to that preventative offer.
but what about people who are not engaging with mental health, but you know they need a drop-in service? Do they have to be referred through mental health, the doctors, the hospital? Because it's got to go through.
So Aspire for You is specifically for people with enduring mental ill health, but it can come through obviously the adult social care room for mental health or via the GP, if that's what you mean.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
And well, just on that, you talk about a drop-in service. The drop-in is going to carry on one day a week. And what will that drop-in service? What will that be like? What will that offer? Is it literally just come in and talk to someone and have a cup of tea?
Yeah. So it is that, but it's also signposting and advice and guidance to people. So if people just need that extra bit of support, or if they're they're interested in volunteering somewhere, they just need that bit more information. It's somebody to come in, have a cup of tea with, have a chat, and say, these are the resources in Dudley, and signpost that person to that particular service and link them up.
So it's wider than just mental health. It could be anything in terms of volunteering.
It's particularly mental health focused.
Yeah.
But it is open to anybody. So it could be open to carers. For instance, if a carer is caring for somebody with a mental illness and they want to know, well, what support's available for my brother, for my sister. So it can be a bit wider. And then also, like I say, there's somebody volunteering who used to go to Woodside who's actually volunteering at the drop-in. So it's also providing that sort of support and confidence building for people.
Someone who's been through. So if Caroline did know of someone, for example, who needed support, she could steer them towards going to the drop-in centre, and that might get the ball rolling. Could that get the ball rolling?
That there is, but then obviously that's limited to that one location. But Aspire for You is all over the borough. So we are keen to sort of promote that because we have paid for it. We've commissioned that service.
And so to get access to Aspire for You, you're basically going through your GP.
No, you come through adult social care. So you'd come through adult social care's access team, and not just as if you were going to Woodside. So effectively, instead of as you would come through social care to access Woodside, instead of accessing Woodside, you'd be accessing Aspire for You. But it's the same process.
I think what we'll do is we'll pull a flow chart together and put contact details on it and let the committee have it. So it's clear.
I think that would be helpful. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think, sorry.
Go on, Caroline, and then I'll go to.
I think
Mr. Davies.
some people who don't know the process of going through adult social care to be referred, that's where the people I have coming in because of obvious language barriers and stuff like that. How would we help those people?
So in terms of obviously access, everything goes through access in adult social care, through the access team in adult social care, and then would filter out because they're screening, and obviously, you know, if it's safeguarding, if it's mental health, if it's disability. So everything normally goes through there. So we would normally direct everybody to that resource, that single access number, and they would then signpost to the appropriate service. And if there's language issues, they can support with that. And going back to Aspire Few again, which I know I'm promoting, but they are very sort of innovative and forward thinking. So they're very, very good on like social media, engaging with young people on TikTok and all this type of stuff that I have no clue about, but that's what they do. And that's actually that's helping people as well, because younger people do engage in different ways. So our younger cohort as well, it's helping them as well.
I have a couple of immigrants who are isolated, very lonely, mental health on Starbridge Road, actually. Would it be me who would phone the access team for that person?
It could be.
So it's going to be somebody like me, not the doctors, because he's not going to engage with the doctors. He's very isolated, no family at all. And that group, them groups, Aspire For You, would help him to build relationships with other people. He's suffering severely with depression, obviously, because he's lonely and wherever, and a big language barrier. So could I phone the access team for him, or have I got to refer him to the doctors to have him assist?
No, so because this is a purely social care offer, so you could refer, or anybody could refer straight into access. It doesn't require a GP referral or anything like that to access the service.
The access team's job in effect is to work out the person's needs, work out what they are and are not eligible for, and then make sure that that person's signposted down the right pathway to get support. So, you know, we have an obligation under the Care Act to undertake that process. I do recognise what you're saying, though. There are a lot of people who don't have a formal diagnosis and haven't accessed support before who definitely would benefit from it. So I think, you know, we'll provide the referral pathway for access, and they'll answer those questions. And also, counsellors regularly, yourself included, contact me directly with caseworker and sometimes want advice on what the best route through is, whether it's safeguarding or whether it's isolation. You know, sometimes it's not clear cut. You need a bit of support with that.
For some reason, there's quite a lot of, in central Dudley, a lot of immigrants that have come from Afghanistan and places like that, and where is it, Italy and stuff like that. And the language barrier is a massive thing, and they don't know how to access the services. That's my biggest dilemma at the moment.
We do have a team manager within who's an expert in no recourse to public funds cases. So in that instance, we have to look at what support the council can legally offer based on immigration status and what the council can't offer. And there's formal support and informal support as well. But I'll have a conversation with you after the session and make sure you're signposted to AMRA.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Matt. Councillor Davies?
Thank you, Chair. So it sounds like people can't self-refer to Woodside or to Aspire, but they can self-refer effectively into Access, and then if it's appropriate, that they'll find themselves on the Aspire programme. So understand that. I think I'm actually just interested in that there's a broader programme going on that kind of feeds into this, and I'm going to take the opportunity to ask the question. How are we getting on with the Workwell partnership that the Black Country is running one of the pilots for? Because I'm just thinking that people can as I understand it, people can self-refer into that, and then obviously it needs to be very well connected with the council and what we're doing, including things like Woodside. Well, former Woodside Aspire and that. So where are we with that? I'm just being a bit opportunistic, really. Also, maybe unfair because you weren't expecting me to ask the question.
So in terms of, I couldn't tell you now off the top of my head the specific number of referrals that we've made, but there's certainly a range of employment support related initiatives. I think last year you were asking questions actually about support for people with learning disability. So we've got a raft of different initiatives with different funding streams attached that we will refer across to as part of a range of offers. It depends really on what the individual person's needs are and what the right kind of intervention is. So I suspect, but I might not necessarily be right, Darryl will know better than I do, a lot of the people who are accessing the Aspire support might not be at a point where they're well enough to be looking at employment as an option. There will be some people who are employed, but the majority probably are not. But where Aspire isn't the right option for that person, that would be one of the alternatives that the team would signpost to.
My understanding is that that it's not properly launched yet across all of the Black Country, and I think that'll be happening next month. Yeah. So it's something that I'm not expecting a great deal of referrals to have happened so far, but just something that I'm quite interested to see how it rolls out, because I know that there's a lot of resource being put into that. So it is literally a new initiative, new Workwell coaches, something that we as a council can be hopefully making the most of.
Well, I'll take an action to make sure that our intranet page is updated to staff and made aware, and that the Dudley Community Information Directory is also updated as well, so that offer of support is made clear to people. Because quite often you've got so many different initiatives, it's easy for people not to have up-to-date tools in their locker when it comes to picking up individual cases.
Okay, thanks everyone. Any more questions or comments? Adela?
Thank you, Chair. So my question is on paragraph 9 on page 29, which you mentioned that there's a saving of 14.6k by going to 1 day a week. I just wanted to ask, will the cost of savings increase or will they decrease with the Aspire for You program?
So Aspire for You is already commissioned by us, so there would be no additional cost because we were already paying for that service. So effectively, like I said earlier, we're sort of double paying for the same provision. There is also some scope potentially to still have the drop-in, but because there is a cost associated with renting the community centre, so the potential scope to move that to, say, for instance, a library within Dudley, or rotate it around Dudley to different libraries, and then obviously reduce the cost even more, but still maintain the service provision. So that's something else we're looking at for the future.
Yeah, go on, Councillor Smith. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, since Aspire has taken over, have we seen an increase in people taking up the service?
No, I wouldn't say there's an increase in people. It tends to be a core cohort of people. So you'll get a sort of a core cohort of people who have long-standing mental ill health, who will access these type of services. They're not in a crisis, but they just need that low-level support to maintain themselves in the community. So I wouldn't say there's any more or less, to be honest. It seems fairly consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Just for some clarity on this, again, forgive my ignorance. So we're talking about Woodside Day Service, and the building itself. Is this the building, Matt, you were telling me about that was sort of decaying and?
Yeah, so this is the building that we moved out from over 12 months ago now. Yeah. It was the old school site.
Is it the Gilbert Claughton?
No, it's not quite that bad.
All right. It's come to something.
But it was the school itself was obviously shut down throughout the COVID period, and during that time there was fairly significant of ingress of water through the roof. We had an issue with a lot of lead and copper being stolen from the site. We had a structural survey done going back some time that said we needed to put comfortably over £1 million in just to make the site safe and fit for purpose. And at the end of all of that, you've still got a decaying Victorian school with a roof that's a bit safer. There were issues with the boiler. That was constantly on the blink. And there were some issues around the security of the broader site as well. I think the community centre were only too glad to accommodate the service in the day because the site wasn't being used that much and it's given some income to the community centre itself. So, you know, we could have thrown a lot of money at that building, and I don't think it was a fit and proper environment to run those services from. And to be fair, as the committee heard at the time, there are a lot of people who pre-pandemic had attended, who attached a lot of value to the services, who had friendship groups and networks there. And there was a lot of concern at the time about the proposed changes. We've been able to provide the support that we committed to support. That will now take more of a route through Aspire for You. The important thing is that the staff at Woodside who do have a good working knowledge of the people who are attending are now getting more involved in support planning, reviewing and dealing with some of the wait lists that we're trying to get through. And that's really important because everybody's got a right to have at least annual contact from us. And it gives more assurance that we're dealing with those folks' need. So, as Darryl said, we haven't seen an overall increase in demand. We're just making more out of the infrastructure that we've got. I think, though, there will be a small cohort of people who will miss the woodworking type of activities and some of the unique equipment that they had on site there. Very few people would be too misty-eyed about that particular building because it was bossed.
So the programme that ran from April 24 to June 24 was in the community centre itself. And is that on the same site as this whole building?
I think it's just the other side of the road near the bus stop.
Okay.
Just over the road. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and this is where the drop-in centre will continue to be run from on a weekly basis. Okay. So I just wanted some clarification on that one. Thanks for that. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay. Now look at the recommendations. There's quite a few on this report. Yeah, okay, the report's just for information. So in terms of the transition to Aspire for You, that's all going through, Matt, is that basically happening now as we speak? Yeah, okay, so okay, so do we know the report then, committee? Thank you very much. Thanks, Darryl. Okay. Where are we? Right. Okay, so on to the Better Care Fund then, Matt.
Thank you very much.
On to you.
I've just had quickly conferred with my colleague as to whether or not he wanted to stay for this report, and he's informed me that he would rather not whilst he has his strength. So thank you for your time, Darryl. And for those of you who are remaining. Right, the Better Care Fund. This is a very big deal for not just the council, but for the Integrated Care Board as well. It's very easy to think of the Better Care Fund just as delayed transfers of care. Actually, if you look at the report and the breadth of services that are funded through this particular tranche of cash, it totals about 70 million quid. It's not just hospital avoidance and hospital discharge. It's our reablement service. It's elements of home care. It's our support to carers, occupational therapy, disabled facilities grants, dementia gateways, some investment in the voluntary sector as well. So it's a very big ring-fence pot of cash that comes down in the form of a pooled budget with ourselves and the ICB. Government has a very clear set of expectations in relation to performance. We have to formally submit our plans for usage of the money. We have to describe what performance benefit we're expecting to see as a result of the schemes that we create. There is a joint commissioning committee with ourselves and the ICB that monitors the day-to-day, month-to-month performance of the Better Care Fund. And ultimately, the performance itself is reported through the Health and Wellbeing Board, who have the job of challenging and assuring the progress that we're making at a system level. The major progress that this report starts to describe is the work that we've been doing on reablement this year. We've built a service. We had quite limited reablement capacity. That's where you're looking to get somebody back on their feet and independent as quickly as possible, normally post-hospital discharge, but it can be from a community route. We're up to 90% now in terms of recruitment with that STARS service. We're starting to see the performance that we want in terms of decreasing spend on long-term care. We've got more work to do to get that performance optimised in terms of the maximum number of people who are independent for 6 weeks plus. You've got some performance data in the report that shows the work on hospital avoidance. That's obviously important. The best way to try and free up capacity is minimise the number of people going through the front door in the first place. So there's lots of work done there on things like emergency respite, on increasing domiciliary care support prior to admission. The work that we do on telecare has been discussed here on many occasions. And I know a number of members of the committee are very familiar with the work that goes on at the Carers Hub and at the Dementia Gateways to support people in the community as well. I think the chart on page 40 looks at daily discharges. We, in budget terms, average around 5 discharges a day from the Russell's Hall Hospital. However, there are times when we need to be flexible if the hospital's particularly busy. If we are in peak winter mode, we will move that number of people around and reprofile the number of discharges per day. Generally speaking, we always need to do more work at the start of the week as the hospital catches up from the weekend. So Monday and Tuesdays are quite often the busiest days of the week. So we adapt our offer in line with the daily phone conferences that take place 3 times a day to focus on the discharges and make sure that the 3 pathways out of hospital are working. Pathway 1 is somebody goes home with domiciliary care. Pathway 2 is intermediate care, which is normally at tiled house for a period of up to 6 weeks. Pathway 3 is admission to a complex care placement. That's normally residential nursing or dementia care. Sometimes we end up moving the person on to their permanent long-term care. Sometimes people remain in pathway 3 for the remainder of their lives. But our plan is very clearly to focus on avoidance first. Pathway 1 as the priority. We've seen a lot of growth in domiciliary care package and performance, and intermediate care to try and maximise independence alongside the reablement offer. I asked that a couple of case studies were appended to the report. They're there for the committee to review and ask questions about. But in terms of our current performance, on Tuesday this week, we, for the first time in at least 4 years, had 0 delayed transfers of care attributable to the council from the Russell's Hall Hospital. The data today on the SITREP report was 7. All cases that come through ready for discharge are reviewed on multiple times across the day. And I think we are at this point in time in a very positive place in terms of our performance. The challenge is always when the hospitals get busier in the winter months and demand goes up and the total number of beds in the hospital increases. Can we maintain that throughout the year? Can we do that in a way that doesn't exceed the budget? But manages demand by getting somebody the right intervention at the right time. And the other thing that we will have to monitor very carefully is the impact of the opening of the Midland Met Hospital, which I understand to be scheduled for October, in terms of whether or not that creates additional diversion into the Russell's Hall. And I'm sure Councillor Aston will probably be able to give you a much more frank and free view than I can about the impact of all of that. So that's all I really wanted to pick out with the report. Quite happy to take questions and points of clarification, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Councillor Aston?
Thanks, Chair. Just a comment and then a question. And I'm sure my dad won't mind me using his case and his example. I would be delighted to to write an appendix 3 to this report, as my dad has benefited from intermediate care at Tiled House and the reablement service, and overwhelmingly his experience has been positive. He, you know, that at every step, the directorate has proven very impressive and got my dad back on his feet. So for me, as a personal perspective, things are working exactly as they should. Just regarding maybe STARS and urgent care, and indeed every other bit of the council, which is supported by the Better Care Fund. How are those services being impacted by? I know we're carrying an awful lot of staff vacancies at the moment. How are those services being impacted, if at all, given their ring-fence status? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does make absolute sense. So members will be aware of the spending controls the council's operating to and the restrictions around recruitment. Where our services are statutory in nature, i.e. we have a legal duty to provide them, and or there are services that are subject to a ring-fence grant like this, there are exceptions that have been maintained. So we have still been able to go ahead with the recruitment for the STARS service despite the spending controls. We have prioritised our social work capacity linked to the hospital and to the community teams. So, but I think, you know, there are now in excess of £4 million worth of vacant posts across the directorate. That means that does create additional pressure in terms of casework. There is obviously a limit to which that's sustainable, and it's my job to make sure that we are moving resources around the system to make sure that we don't get ourselves into a position where we've got too few staff trying to deal with too much work. The performance data suggests on the urgent care side of the system we're getting it right. What I have noticed more broadly is that the data that I showed you last time in terms of performance, you could see the great big decrease in assessment and review waiting times that we've had for quite a lengthy period of time, at least over 14 months. For the first time over the last couple of months, that performance has started to plateau. I've seen slight increases in assessment and review times. We're confident we can turn that back round and get it headed the right way, but we need at all times to stay on top of caseload allocation, make sure staff are getting their professional development, the supervision, make sure they're getting support, and as the issues emerge, try and deal with them as quickly as possible. There is a limit to how much any one department can cope with vacant staffing posts before there's an impact, and I don't want that impact to be landing on people who are entitled to a service.
Thanks. Questions, comments? Anything in addition? Okay. Okay then, Matt, I think what's the recommendation for this report? Just to note.
Yeah, do you want me to cover them, Chair? So I think threefold. Firstly, to review the use of the funding, which we've tried to do through describing the services that we're using. Secondly, if there are any views that the committee want me to report back to the Better Care Fund executive either now or after the committee, I'm more than happy to do so. And then I've provided the performance data to set out the effectiveness of the service and the value of the work that's going through. So those are the three, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Well, certainly there's an endorsement from Councillor Aston in there. So, okay, unless there's anything in particular then from the committee then. Yeah, report noted. Thank you very much.
I think technically from a data protection perspective, we should probably say persons who may or may not be blood relatives of people in this committee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Edit out the YouTube version. It doesn't go out live, thankfully. So I think
Mr. Aston Senior, as we speak, is going viral.
It'll just be it'll be redacted. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, So that moves us on to number 8, adult social care strategies. Matt?
Yes, thank you. So this builds on the item that you had last time about Care Quality Commission readiness. A number of members of the committee were asking questions about where can we get the information about strategy, where can we get information about policies, how can we see the work that's been done to review and update the offer of social care in the borough. The astute amongst you will have noted that we've put the detailed appendices on CMIS. The reason for that is that had we printed them, there probably wouldn't be enough room for you all to sit down in the room this evening. So the detail is there for further consideration if you want to go into them. Just to quickly go through the key strategies that have been worked on and are being worked on further as we speak. So we've included in there details of our vision and strategy for the next 5 years. That, as I said last time, is a piece of work that we've done through consultation engagement with not just people who use care and support, but carers, care providers in the borough, staff and our statutory partners. You've also got details in there about the continuous development plan. So that is the document that sets out all of the areas of improvement that we need to achieve to meet not just statutory requirement, but also to assure ourselves in terms of quality. We've included information about the co-production strategy. That's the means by which we involve local people in the way that we set priorities, in the way that we review services, in the way that services are designed, and also the way that local people can influence the services that we commission as well. Not all councils have a co-production strategy, so that's been quite important for us. The commissioning strategy, which sets out how we use public money to buy care services in the borough. It also sets out where we have sufficient supply, where we have further work to do to develop new forms of care and support, and how in the future we'll meet the needs of a growing population. I've included details about the market position statement that drills into more detail about what we commission, where we commission it, how we know the quality of it is sufficient. You've got the overall adult social care strategy and the prevention strategy as well. So when I was talking earlier about diversion away from hospital, that's one example, but the prevention strategy really talks about all the services that we provide that sit before the Care Act. So this is the support that we can offer to people who might not need regulated care and provision, but are beginning to experience a need for support. So services like the Dementia Gateways, the Carers Hub, the Telecare team, Living Well, Feeling Safe, the joint projects we've got with Public Health on nutrition and balance, some of the support in the community around mental health that Daryl's just described, they're examples of those kinds of prevention services. And what that strategy sets out is what we currently have, the impact those services have, and what more we need to do to develop prevention in the borough. The carers strategy, I was at a meeting with carers last week to look at our self-assessment documents. The headline message that carers gave very, very clearly is that when they become aware of the range of support the council provides, it's excellent. But a number of carers there said, I wish I'd known about this sooner on in my caring pathway. When I started to become isolated, when I started to struggle. We've got a project with an organisation called Mobilise to help us reach carers sooner, but there's very clearly a sense from carers in the borough that we need to do more to identify and reach people and promote those services more effectively. So one of the promises I made in that meeting was to work with our communications team to think about what information can we have in GP surgeries, public transport, libraries, police stations, community centres, religious establishments, and all the kinds of places where people are likely to go to increase the chance of people being aware of what's there for them. So it doesn't become a crisis before they encounter that support. The carer strategy goes on to talk about the types of support that we offer for carers, not just in terms of respite. We offer a training programme for carers. with things like dementia awareness, moving and handling skills, etc. Welfare benefits, increasingly in recent years, winter warmth advice has been very popular and well accessed as costs of energy have risen. People have wanted to work out what they can do and what grants they can access to help keep down the impact of those costs. Preparing for adulthood, we've talked about in some detail here before. That's the point of transition from children's to adult social care. The dementia strategy is exactly what's written on the tin, and a big focus there is on earlier diagnosis and earlier support for people, but also making sure, linked to our commissioning work, that we develop the right kind of care and support for people in the future, as dementia impacts on more people and the form that dementia takes is more complex. The autism strategy, piece of work that was co-produced with the Learning Disability and Autism Partnership Board. It's a legal requirement. We have that strategy. It's currently being refreshed by people who have autism. So it's their aspirations for life in the borough and the support they receive. Learning and development, which is not just about how we train our staff, but how we train and support those services that we commission to train their care workers and their staff as well. And last but not least, the workforce strategy. Now, this is an area we definitely have more work to do, because we have growing pockets of areas of recruitment that are challenging, some of which I've listed here before, such as occupational therapy, mental health, qualified social workers, etc. And what that document does is look at how we recruit, how we encourage people to come and work with the council, how we maximise apprenticeships, and how we make sure that we've got sufficient skills to discharge the statutory duties that we've got. The reason that's still an ongoing piece of work is we need to now think about that in the context of our economic circumstances. So it can't just be about filling every vacant post. It's about making sure that we cut the cloth, but at the same time manage the performance. So more work there. And communication, as you heard today with the first report that we had this evening, communication is much broader than pumping out loads of messages and hoping they're relevant for people. We know, and we learned through the pandemic, that people have got very different ways of interpreting information and different communication needs. So we have a constant job of work to do to make sure that we adapt our communication appropriately and that we're getting feedback from the people that we support to help tailor that. So much like we're using the evidence from the complaints and the compliments process to inform service delivery, we do the same in terms of evaluating the effectiveness of our communication. There's a whole raft of stuff about the statutory frameworks we operate to. I appreciate I've gone through that in very headline terms, so it's over to you to ask any questions you wish about the compendium of strategies that I've reeled off for you. I've deliberately written that paper so that you've got a quick overview of what the purpose and objectives of each one of those documents are, and you know where to find them so that you can access the further detail. And I fully expect, Chair, that, you know, when people have done that, you may want to revisit this at a future date. Over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, thanks, Matt. Questions, comments from the committee? Councillor Davies?
Cheers, Matt. Can you repeat all that again, please?
Yes, I can. Certainly, Councillor
No, it's fine.
But I'm choosing to do so in written form.
No, obviously, so much work must go into these strategies, and it's not just writing a strategy, it's writing strategies that work, build on the experience of the team, what we know works, what doesn't work, where we need to improve. So there's a hell of a lot in there. One thing I don't know whether to ask you outside the meeting or in the meeting, but you mentioned about access to winter support for fuel costs over the winter for the elderly. Obviously, without going fully into it here, but we know that a significant number of our residents in the borough will sadly not receive the winter fuel allowance this winter because the new government chose to take that away from them. And there'll be a significant number of residents who are just above the pension credit threshold. They will now not get that winter fuel allowance. How do you think that will impact on us as a council this winter? Are you concerned? And what might we have in place to prepare for that?
Yeah, thank you. We have had pre-existing issues with fuel poverty, and the demand, as I said when I presented the report, for advice and information about energy has been consistently high, particularly as we've seen prices spike over the last 2-3 year period. It's very difficult to know what impact the removal of the grant will have as a universal benefit. I do know that there is going to be some targeted support for lowest income households. What we need to work out is the proportion of people in Dudley that will benefit, and then make sure that where we have got advice and support services, that we're targeting them at the people who need the help the quickest. So I think we've got some work to do to get there. We do encounter issues arising from fuel poverty with a number of the cases that come through the door of the access service. So, people living in damp conditions obviously has a clear and well-established link with respiratory problems. We have done work with the fire service where we've had issues with people using dangerous sources of fuel as an alternative to turning on the gas. They're extreme examples. They're low in volume, but that can be very dangerous if properties aren't properly ventilated. So we need to continue our conversations with the fire service to make sure that we're giving people the full range of information that we can do. And we also need to think laterally about access to things like the Household Support Fund and triangulate that data against the data that we've got on fuel poverty. So any increased instances of fuel poverty will certainly not be helpful in terms of demand for social care. It's not in and of itself one of the major driving factors for referral into our service. So our drivers are things like carer breakdown, like dementia accelerating, mobility becoming too difficult to manage, living environments no longer being navigable for people if we're talking about older people. But we do have a lot of cases referred through to places like our adults at risk team. These are people that I think Councillor Reid supports quite often with her service, where you've got people living with poverty, living with not just fuel poverty but general poverty, and that can be a big driver for demand. Yeah.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, so thank you. Obviously, there'll be, for me in particular, I'm concerned about residents in Brierley Hill and Wordsley South in my ward, but also concerned about residents across the borough, older age pensioners who will be at risk this winter because of this decision, this change. So you've outlined some of the ways that the council can and will be helping people there. Are you able to circulate some advice like that to all members across the council, so as we can play our part, we can help our residents as much as we can, and signpost or know who to go to if we've got residents who are particularly suffering this winter because of this decision?
Yeah, of course, more than happy to do that, and also we need to factor in the work that the voluntary sector is doing in this space as well. So there were a range last year of locations identified where people could go to stay warm in the borough. Now that might seem like it's almost a Dickensian step to take, but actually, we do see people show up at the libraries in the winter months to get warm. And I'll have a conversation with Andy Gray and the CVS to see what the plans are for this year, coordinate all of that and make sure it's cascaded to members.
Caroline.
I think because I've managed to look after the adults and elderly for quite a few number of years, I do believe that the sheltered schemes are at an advantage because they're monitored more closely and they have got warmth within the building. It's more of the elderly who are in the community, who are in small bungalows, who are more isolated from the public. I seem to be having, like last winter, they'll come in from 11 o'clock in the morning till 9 at night, just to save their gas and electric. So I think the sheltered schemes are at an advantage, and we've got quite a few of those in Dudley. But I think the poverty is going to be around the elders in the bungalows and the small areas where they haven't got support. I think that's where it's going to target bad, and those without families.
Yeah, I look to some of my colleagues in housing for advice in this space as well, because obviously we do have issues with outside of Dudley Council's housing stock, which has a minimum standard to achieve. There are issues with the quality of the housing that's available in some parts of the borough, and the obvious links that can have to the kind of living environments that you're describing. So yeah, we all need to do everything that we can do to target that support, make sure people are aware of what's available to them, and really monitor what the impact of all of that is. It's always very eye-opening, some of the cases that you see come through, and there's definitely no scope for complacency in that regard, I don't think.
Thanks, Matt. Adam?
Thanks, Chair. My question is, I suppose, what I would expect the CQC to want to know, and that is, are you confident, and can you provide assurance that all of the adult social care strategies are regularly refreshed, reviewed, co-produced, and in line with the ever-changing health and care landscape? Thanks, Chair.
2 minutes to answer that.
What a hardiest cracker of a question that was, with a particular flourish at the end. As I've said here before, the Care Quality Commission has a standard information return that it will expect us to respond to as a council. It's the same information return. I think there's a minimum 35 separate items in it. We have to table that evidence in advance of the inspectorate arriving on site, and we get a 3-week window to do that. What we've done as part of the continuous development group is firstly map out exactly what all of that information looks like. Secondly, review where our information had last been reviewed. Thirdly, start writing new strategies like crazy to make sure that we plug the gaps that existed. And it was a timely reminder, because many of those policies and practices predated the pandemic, and some of the content was no longer appropriate given the changing nature of support that we offer. So what you've got in that report is most of the updated content that we will be expected to table, and most of the documentation that we need to set out. There is a constant job of work to review and ensure relevance, which is why when I was talking about the workforce strategy, that's one area where I know we've got more work to do before we're up to standard on that one. In other areas, I think we've got a much more mature and established approach. And I think the one key thing is that whole cycle of continuously trying to learn and evaluate and tie all your data into one place to get a clear picture. I think we can account for our performance, we can account for our strategy, our vision, we can account for our key risks, and critically, we're getting increasingly confident about being able to describe what we're doing where we know we've got issues that we need to improve on. So in that regard, I am confident. But it's a fourth bridge job. You get to the end of one strategy, and then somebody will say, have we got a strategy on such and such? And there's a bit of head scratching, and the pens start hitting the paper again.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I mean, I was going to sort of pick up on a little bit of that myself, but you kind of covered most of it there. In preparation for the, for the inspection, there's no obvious gaps, basically, I think you're confident that you've...
Yes, Chair, there's many obvious gaps in our preparation for inspection. If only I'd thought of them.
Other than the workforce strategy, that seems to be the only one where you're feeling a bit more vulnerable.
The workforce strategy, I think what you've got in Dudley is a unique setup. So ourselves and other councils that are in pre-section 114 controls, the nature of what we can do in terms of recruitment is different by virtue of our financial restrictions. So it's not creditable to have a workforce strategy that says we're going to fill every post, we're going to have an explicit aim to be the most generous employer in terms of pay, and we're going to have a really exhaustive inductive learning and development programme that's going to commit another series of millions of council money. We know we've got to prioritise, we know we've got to cut our cloth. What we need to be able to do is evidence why we've prioritised some posts over others, what the correlatory link is between that and performance and risk. And then I think we've got to be super creative around things like apprenticeships. Now that's an area that this council has been successful in. And I've met a number of people who've started life working for the council as a care worker or in a frontline role, who've gone on through apprenticeships to access appropriate training, to get qualified. And many of those individuals have gone on through the ranks up into management roles, etc. We're clearly in a grow your own environment. We need to maintain that despite the challenges that we face. And also, one of the things that's different here is we're now seeing people move within the directorate and indeed across the council into different opportunities as they arise. And obviously, it's really important that we make sure that where people are doing that, they've got the right support to develop into the roles. I think we've got to think really clearly about induction processes as well, because if you know the main people that are stepping into newer roles are from within the council, then the nature of induction you'd offer might be different to somebody who'd never worked in the council before. So all of that needs to be nuanced and properly thought through. And I think the comment that was made earlier is absolutely bang on the money. If a strategy doesn't feel like the way you're spending your time, it's just a document. If a strategy doesn't represent this borough and where we've got to and what people's experiences of care are like, you haven't got it right. So what's really important is that not just the inspectorate actually, but just generally, we can give a clearer account of what care and support's like in this borough from the perspective of the people who receive it, from the perspective of our carers and of our staff. And, you know, I think if we can get that across and the strengths and the talents of the place are properly communicated and the risks are honestly described, but with a clear sense of what the plan is to fix them, then I'm confident, yeah, because I think, you know, I'm not going to get into individual case examples because I've already hoisted Councillor Aston by his father's petard, but, you know, last night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was talking to our social workers who had stepped up to deal with an emergency case with absolutely no notice. It was a really risky situation. They stayed up until the wee small hours of the morning to make sure that person was safe. Now, what we need to do is translate those stories about human experience here and get across in a way that's clear and honest and accessible. This is what we do. And what we do is extremely challenging, very valuable, very difficult, very complex, and often, you know, in the best examples, life-changing. I don't want to oversell that, and I don't want to provide a glossy document that, you know, a carer would look at and say, well, that's not my experience of the support I've seen from the council. I want to try and strike the right balance. But I think at the moment, it's really important that people are still allowed to be proud about the work that they do and celebrate where they are making a difference. And that's the reason why, despite the restrictions we face, I will be doing at zero cost to the taxpayer awards for the staff this year in the council chamber to showcase that success, say thank you to people and acknowledge the, you know, the vast number of our staff who do go way beyond the extra mile and deal with incredible levels of risk day by day. And, you know, there's an open invitation to any member of the committee that wants to come along and join that process. We all know what the bad news is. We know what the challenges are. We can't lose sight of the things that matter and say thank you to the people who are doing the difficult job of delivering it for us. So I am determined that that will happen.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, let us know about dates and stuff for that, and we would be interested. coming along and supporting that. I think that's really important. Any more questions or comments from members? I suppose for us, the challenge is, I mean, you know, looking at the recommendations, review and challenge the strategies, they will form part of the CQC inspection. So our job is to make sure the strategies are fit, but I suppose we don't come across the strategies in day-to-day life, but you do bring reports about and update us in terms of what's going on.
I think that's a very fair point, Chair. So job number one for me was, let's get all the information in one place so I can respond to the ask that's tabled at the committee last time.
Yeah.
You can look at this from a lay member's perspective. So if there's stuff in there that doesn't make sense and isn't accessible, that's valuable feedback, because I don't think the regulator will necessarily have a different view. If there are inconsistencies in those strategies that don't make sense, ask the question. And if there are things that you think need to be changed or could be clearer, please don't feel shy about that, because when you get into the battle rhythm of drafting what is a vast body of work in a relatively short space of time, there can be times where you think, actually, well, we've said that over here and it doesn't tie up with what we're saying over here in the prevention strategy. So, yeah, more than happy to take any questions at any point. And as members do go through those strategies, if you've got questions, we can either cover it in business arising in the committee, or if there's significant enough issues, then we'll table it as a substantive item.
Yeah, put it on the agenda. Lovely. Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, anyone? Okay, well, thanks, Matt. Obviously, yes, we'll take all of that on board if the committee's happy to accept that report and the recommendations in it. Well, because we moved the other item, I do believe, other than are there any questions have been given in notice? No? Okay. Okay, well, thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks for attending. Thanks, Matt. Thank you. See you all again soon. Have a good evening.